What's cracking, y'all? You are now watching Boo TV. Appreciate you for stopping in. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, stay notified, and let's get into the topic for today. Tim Duncan. Mr. Big Fundamental. I recently put out a post saying that I have to come back to the Tim Duncan subject, talk about it, spit some truth on it. And actually, a long time ago, I put out a somewhat similar video to this about the talking points, but figured I wanted to bring it up again, especially since the channel has grown a lot since I brought these points up. Tim Duncan, truly one of the greatest basketball players of all time, widely regarded as the greatest power forward of all time, although really, he played center more, but whatever, he got that. If anything, it's just a testament to his versatility, to be honest. Side note, I think it's funny how I get labeled notoriously a LeBron hater, though having LeBron in my top 5. You know, I do put videos out where I poke holes at other players, but nobody really wants to watch those videos. And to be fair, only watch what you want to watch. I get it. But apparently, LeBron is the only guy I poke and prod at. Like I said, 90% of the time, I'm just addressing the Bron Goblins and the over obnoxious fanboys, to be honest. I have made contrarian-driven Kobe Bryant content as well. But, oh well. I digress. I might be a Tim Duncan hater after this. Who knows? I always find it funny how we talk about other great players, top 10 caliber players, or even top 5. And we get in these debates and disagreements, and someone always finds holes and has particular opinions on certain players that they feel should be things that are a knock against them, or make certain accomplishments less impressive, whatever the case may be. And they may provide context behind that, in all fairness. And we all have our different opinions, you know? We talk about Kobe, or people talk about Kobe, but we talk about Kobe. And there is a notorious, he had Shaq for 3 of those championships and never won Finals MVP during that three-peat. That's the main argument brought up against Kobe Bryant when they like to, weigh his championships. Jordan, on his legacy, they say, or even against his championships, they'll say he couldn't do it in the 80s. He was a loser. He needed all those other guys to get old and retire. For LeBron James, it's the super teams disrupting the competitive balance, or all the finals losses. Shaq, well, now he needed Kobe, or he needed Dwayne Wade. And he got crushed by Hakeem in the finals. Well, he was a loser, an arrogant ball hog, an asshole. Bill Russell, there wasn't many teams at the time. Boston was stacked with all the greats. Though y'all still like to call them firemen and plumbers, but whatever. And Bill was offensively challenged, etc., etc., etc. I could go on, right? Now, in my circles, where my attention has been drawn, areas I have been around, even people in my family, everybody has but this, but that, well this, well that. But nobody ever says that about Tim Duncan. Maybe it's because his nature makes him so likable. He's not polarizing. So it's like, why bother that guy? He isn't doing anything to anybody. I mean, I get it. If Duncan had a long rap sheet of garbage performances, but still worked his way to the same level of success, I might be like, it's just Duncan, bro. But let's talk about Timmy briefly. As I talk about Timmy, like many people talk about the other greats when putting an argument up against them. Let's talk about how in Tim Duncan's prime, though, like I keep it 100, Y'all know me. Though not the peak of his prime, but still in his prime, in the 2007 NBA Finals against the Cleveland Cavaliers, LeBron James, he did not play well by Tim Duncan standards. And Tony Parker got Finals MVP. Defensively, he was still more or less Tim Duncan. Right? On that series, he averaged 18 points, 11.5 rebounds, 2 blocks, on 44% field goal percentage. Which, for most other players, that's pretty damn good. But not for Duncan. He was disrupted on the offensive end. 44% field goal percentage for somebody at his position is like a shooting guard shooting in the mid-30s for field goal percentage. Granted, the Cavaliers were one of the best defensive teams in the league, despite the narrative. But you are still MFing Tim Duncan. The same way I give Kobe crap about not rising to the challenge and playing poorly against the Pistons in 2004, I'm doing the same thing. Now, no slight against Tony Parker. Fantastic point guard. And he did what he had to do. But Zydrunas Ilgauskas and Drew Gooden made life pretty difficult for Timmy and did an admirable job defending Duncan. But let's be honest here. Tony Parker pales in comparison in caliber of player to Tim Duncan. Shaq getting MVPs over Kobe? Understandable. Hell, even if Dwayne Wade snatched some finals MVPs away from LeBron James, even that would have been understandable. But Parker over Duncan? Could you imagine if Tony Parker got finals MVPs over Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, or LeBron James had they played together? Could you imagine the venom, the vitriol at Mike, Kobe, and LeBron had a player of Tony Parker's caliber, or Tony Parker, got finals MVP over them? And y'all give Kobe crap over Shaq. And that's Shaq. But we talking about Tony Parker. Timmy, you had to deliver more offensively, but you didn't. And honestly, if I'm going to be fair and true to myself, like I try to be, there is a fair argument, despite Duncan's offensive woes, that Tim Duncan should have got Finals MVP over Tony Parker. Duncan led the Spurs in 4 major statistical categories during that series. Even with the offense being subpar, a strong argument is there for MVP, if not MVP, at least co-MVP with Tony Parker. If I'm going to be fair. But it didn't happen that way. All right. So let's talk about the next chip. Since we always like to talk about the stories behind the other players' championships, you know. Tim Duncan got his 5th championship completely out of his prime. Way out of his prime. He was not quite the fundamental cornerstone that he used to be with the San Antonio Spurs. The burden of responsibility was pretty well equally distributed throughout the Spurs team, throughout the roster. And that's saying a lot, considering how that really has been the norm and the genetic makeup for that franchise, all things considered, right? Could you imagine if LeBron, Kobe, Mike, Magic, Bird got any of their championships near the end of their decline, 2 seasons removed from being retired? On the other hand, you can look at that as greatness, because let's face it, Tim Duncan still almost averaged a 15-point double-double that season and actually did that in the finals. But Kawhi Leonard got MVP. And this isn't even prime Kawhi Leonard. This is Kawhi Leonard 3 years before his breakout season. Even with that being said, you could still pose an argument for Timmy possibly getting co-MVP with Kawhi Leonard. But he didn't get the hardware. It wasn't written that way. We talk about other players' bad playoff performances, individual performances, especially LeBron, Kobe especially. Duncan had them as well. And as a Laker fan, I loved it. I couldn't stand Tim Duncan. I couldn't stand the Spurs. Love Tim Duncan now. Still don't like the Spurs. 2001 Western Conference Finals. Tim Duncan, 9 points. I remember it. I remember it like yesterday. 3 for 14 shooting. Swept. 2008 Western Conference Finals. Kobe with no Shaquille O'Neal. The resurgence. Duncan, 12 points. That's just 2 of them. There were more. There weren't a lot, but there were more. But anyway, with all that being said, I really only say that to say, man, let's keep it 100. Because I see certain players get nitpicked more than others. And if that's your stance on one player, just keep that stance with other players. I'm sure the Birds and the Magic Johnsons were getting the same treatment back in the 80s regarding Bird's lackluster offensive finals in 1981 and Tragic Johnson 1984 finals. I'm sure. There wasn't Twitter, there wasn't instant media, output like it is now, but I'm sure it was on the, pre-recorded sports shows, radio shows, newspaper articles. I just don't like when people switch up their narrative or switch up their logic when they try to protect one player over the other. That's when I side eye. Also, I want to give a big shout out to CP3 the GOAT, aka the Iceman Thomas, who had a great take on Tim Duncan when I put the post out. And even, has a very good answer to what I said when I opened up this video, as to why, the Tim Duncan context and storylines don't come out. And this is what CP3 the GOAT says. Basketball historian really knows this stuff. Quote, I'm reading it to you from my phone. I mentioned Tim Duncan getting a pass. CP3 said, Tim doesn't get a pass. He gets ignored altogether. Let's not act like anyone really even talks about Duncan much to begin with. LOL. Of all the guys in the top 10 convo, he gets his flowers the least because nobody really watched the Spurs but Spurs fans. So nobody really knows about the bad games or series he had because they were lowly rated anyways. Besides the 2 in the 2010s against Bron. If he played a bigger market, excuse me, I'm sick, my bad. Damn. If he played in a bigger market or against a better known competition on the finals, he would probably be scrutinized more. But what can you really say when the vast majority of the time he did perform well? It's the same thing with Bill Russell. He had plenty of bad performances, but they never outweighed the good, and especially considering they were too dominant in the win column. Nobody really cared. Reputation carries a lot of the time. I can't disagree with a lot of what he said. That's a valid point. Nobody's really watching him. Nobody really watched him unless they were probably facing your team or, like he said, a big marquee game on television or a series. So I think that's a very valid, strong point. It carries a lot of weight. Carries a lot of water. No, that's valid. I think that probably definitely has something to do with it. Absolutely. Hey, that's all for this one, folks. Appreciate y'all for stepping in. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, stay notified. And I will catch you on the next one. Let me know what you think about it. We out, baby.